Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
Well, John, we're back. I hope this isn't like riding a bike, because whenever I quit riding a bike, I couldn't remember how to do it anymore. But here we are back on the air after a month and a week hiatus. And a lot of things have happened in our time off, but one of the things that hadn't really happened is sports a whole lot. So we didn't miss much.
No, we're back, and we're back in the studio.
Yeah, that's right. We wore masks, and I took mine off because I just don't. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good.
You still have yours on, and I took mine off just because my voice just isn't that strong when you get right down to it. But anyway, we do have a lot to talk about, because a lot did happen since the last time we were on air, which I think was May 15th or something, the 22nd. 22nd, I think.
The days kind of run together.
John,
weeks, months.
Yeah, in this last segment we have here, we're going to talk a little bit about our sabbatical hobbies, but we're going to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about high school sports and that kind of thing, because one of the things that did happen while we were gone was they had a May 28th Board of Control meeting for the KHSAA, and they set forth the guidelines for how athletes could return and how sports could return, and they eliminated the traditional dead period, which would be going on right now, because they basically said, well, we've been on a 3-month dead period, so why extend that? And so they started kind of slow rolling some things, I think, on June 1 through the 15th, and things have picked up. Barron, I think, went ahead and could start doing that phase 1 stuff on June 15th. Glasgow put it off for a little while. They do have, I think, 3 doctors on their Board of Education. I think they wanted to have a more say-so in their plan, from what I understood. And so they didn't really start back until a week after that, once they got their plans in and that kind of thing. And then Barron is in a phase 2 aspect of where they are now. And let me say this real quick about COVID-19.
And some schools have not even opened it up yet.
That's right. And what I was going to say is
Jefferson County.
Kentucky we've done a good job here of controlling the spread of the virus overall, compared to a lot of states, not just around us, but across the nation. Some of those states didn't have the virus early. We did, and so we took some some folks would say drastic measures, and so I feel like that's what's allowing us this opportunity to have some athletes get together with their coaches, have some school-related functions in terms of use of facilities and that kind of thing. And so that's good. I thought that was important for the coaches and the players to have that contact again. And how have you seen it from your perspective there at the school?
Well, it's gone fine. I think you're right. Both the coaches and the players have welcomed this.
Yeah.
It's more of a conditioning deal than anything else for the most part.
Uh-huh.
In that first phase that Barron just got out of, just for example, with say, for example, basketball. I mean, of course, you can only have 10 kids in at a time for any sport,
right?
Plus a coach. But like a basketball team could come in and you could not share a ball. You could dribble a ball, and if you wanted to shoot it, you had to go get it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you could work on some ball handling and things like that. Football was just mainly conditioning, because you couldn't even throw a ball.
Right.
But I think the kids did enjoy coming back. Volleyball is the same way. Things like that. I think golf was a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Cross country is a little bit easier in terms of that. Starting Monday, which is today, you could actually share a ball with another player.
Mm-hmm.
Which would enable a quarterback to throw to the receiver, but if another person got a hold of it, they'd have to clean it.
Right.
A basketball player could shoot and have a rebounder.
Mm-hmm.
But if a third party got involved, that's not allowed.
Yeah, so there's no real competition at the moment. It's more just general training and that kind of thing.
Temperature checks before that you come in, and it's written down and so forth. So you have there's coaches have to wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty detailed and it's pretty structured, but all in all, I think it's going, as of right now, as well as it could. Still no scrimmaging and none of that stuff, and we'll just see how it goes from here.
Right, and I understand that there's supposed to be a Board of Control meeting, I think July 8th through 10th.
That's 3 days.
3 days. I think that's their usual summer get-together, so to speak. I assume they are getting together. I didn't see where it was all going to be Zoom call this time.
No, it's in person.
Yeah, and so... And I think a couple of things that have to happen is, July 1 is the start of the fiscal year on the federal level, and I guess the state level for that matter. And so I'm sure there'll be some things you have to look at related to funding for the schools. There'll probably be that kind of thing, discussions about, projections and all that they're going to have to look at. And I guess that's going to come with some state guidance. And so when the Board of Control meets, maybe we'll have an idea. Right now, I think the football season's supposed to start August 21st, I think is what it is. And then I think the week before that, soccer and volleyball could start if we followed the regular calendar. And then I think maybe a week or so before that even is when golf gets underway. Cross country starts a little bit later. And so I think there's some anticipation out of that Board of Control meeting coming up July 8th through 10th. So that's a week from, what is that? Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we're looking for some guidance or a better understanding of what our fall sports timetable actually will look like.
Yeah, and it's I think there's a lot of things up in the air.
Yeah.
Will they start on time? First of all, are they going to be allowed to play?
Right.
If so, will they start on time in middle of August? My gut tells me no. I think that my gut tells me that could be pushed back a couple weeks to maybe September, just to see what colleges and other people are going to do or other states.
Right.
I don't have any inside information. That's just kind of my gut tells me that. A second question would want to be, are they going to allow? If you allow one sport, are you going to allow all sports? Or could there ever be a situation where, say, golf and cross country could start and some of the team sports could not?
Uh-huh.
And then the third situation would be if they do allow sports, what about crowds and things like that? So there's a ton of questions that are unanswered. None of these questions are easy.
Mm-hmm.
I've said all along that the more I look at all this stuff, it's there's no perfect answers. I just think in college, pro, and even high school, it just has to be managed.
Yeah.
There's just not a perfect answer until there's a vaccine, and that's not going to happen until the next year or the end of this year. So then you got to just make the call: is it manageable?
Mm-hmm.
And those are not easy. They're not easy because, we need sports.
Mm-hmm.
Golly, our country desperately needs sports. We're about to rip each other apart. We need sports. Young people need sports.
Yeah.
It's good for them. But doing it safely is the key.
Yeah. Pull that mic up a little bit to you. There you go. On that front, you're talking about the pushback of the potential pushback of starts and that kind of thing. A couple of things that came out of that May 28th KHSA Board of Control meeting was this. One was Julian Tackett, said that we have to be prepared for one size does not fit all, meaning not just sports, but also from district to district, that some districts were going to be in a position where they could do more than other districts just because either the infection rate was down, they had the facilities to be able to properly space students apart to practice social distancing or to meet these guidelines. And some school boards, some school district administrators were not going to like the situation they were in and were probably going to have to make their own decisions about their districts. And I felt like in that conversation that sounded true for the sports themselves, that golf may be treated differently than football or soccer may be treated differently than cross country because of the necessary restrictions those sports were going to apply themselves, contact versus non-contact, and golf is a non-contact sport in every possible way if you want it to be. And cross country can be as well in a lot of ways, because you could change that everybody shotgun starts to some sort of staggered start system and change up how you time the race and that kind of thing, and you can pull that stuff off. And you just, there's no way around contact in football or even soccer, because everybody's kicking the same ball and they're usually colliding with each other. It's a much more physical sport than people probably realize a lot of times. And then volleyball is an indoor sport, and it's kind of got a little bit different situation, because you could have team-to-team contact in terms of touching the ball, but you don't have to have team-to-team contact in any other way. And so maybe it has a different kind of setup. And so I guess personally what I'd like to see is for the KHSAA to say, we understand the inherent differences in these sports, and so for that reason, some of these can start, and some of these may not be able to on the schedule you initially planned for them to. But they're probably still going to be in a position to leave that up to the independent school boards and superintendents, because they're going to want to make their own calls, obviously, for the safety of their own students and we talk about the students. Here's the thing about this. A lot of people who are 25 and younger are asymptomatic for COVID-19, and they can have it and never know it, because they didn't get a fever, they didn't have any of the symptoms necessarily. They get tested and they say, yes, you have the antibodies indicating that you've had the virus. But a lot of people in our age range, John, are not asymptomatic. Our age range and up, and some younger people who have, cancer or other immune deficiency disorders that have affected their ability to fight a virus, fight disease in that way. And so what we're really talking about here is not whether or not the students are at risk. We're talking about the people who are in contact with the students, especially the coaches and the teachers and that kind of thing. And we really need these things to resume, but we also need everybody to be safe. And that is, I guess, for people who don't really grasp this idea, that's really the issue we're talking about here, is can we keep not necessarily the students. It's important to keep them safe, but the people they're going to come in contact with, that's who we're really trying to keep safe. And as an example, and this is a terrible example, the only death from the coronavirus in Monroe County was a 47-year-old teacher. I mean, that's what he was a teacher in the Monroe County School District. He's the only death. I don't know when he came in contact with it, but that's just an example of the types of people that actually need to be protected in this circumstance.
Well, that's the scary part about it, because like you said, I think the players and the young people are overall fine.
Yeah.
And the difference between high school and college and even pros is we don't have the ability at the high school level to test every day.
Right.
So a lot of these kids who may have it or could have it are asymptomatic, and I don't worry about them. I do worry about coaches and maybe parents or other people that they come in contact with that you don't know. That's ultimately probably the biggest question mark that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is just such a difficult call. I still think it has to be managed. I do think it needs to the KSWSA. I do think they would be wise to don't do one size fits all. I think certain sports are much easier to manage right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you necessarily leave it simply to school districts, because I don't know very many school districts are going to ban their teams from playing, and the neighboring school district allows them to. That's
right.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's a pretty tricky situation. I mean, that's one of the things we haven't really talked about.
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
If things have to get pushed back or even scrapped, I mean, in some districts and not others, it's going to be hard to play some of these sports anyway, because you've got these schedules that are already set up, and you're going to be talking about week-to-week phone calls. Hey, can you play this Friday night if we're talking about football or something?
Right. So, we things are moving. In a lot of ways, I don't see high school sports being ahead of college and pro sports.
No.
And I think they could follow them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see them jumping ahead unless, of course, Iowa did. They played their baseball and softball in June, and as far as I know, everything has gone well with them. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah.
They played their high school baseball season in June and July, so they've started for a couple weeks. So, I think a lot of it's, if colleges and pros, success, Major League Baseball and basketball and NBA successfully pulls off what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
If colleges looks like they're going to play, then that's probably going to be give high schools a bigger green light. If that shuts down, there's no way I think high school will be able to go forward.
That's right, and those big tests, especially on the professional level, are coming up because the NBA folks will be, I guess, arriving.
Next week.
Yeah, next week at Disney World or the Worldwide of Sports in Orlando, whichever way you want to call it, and they'll have a season start July 30th. So they're going to do like a couple of weeks, 3 weeks of kind of training camp kind of thing. And I'm guessing a big part of this is just trying to make sure. I would guess a large part of this 3-week period for the NBA is to get everybody there, make sure everybody's tested. Those who test positive, they can be quarantined for 2 weeks, and they can still be back in time to get the season started on July 30th. They're going to play about 8 games, and then they'll go into the playoffs, I think, around August 17th. There are 22 teams that are going to be there. So that's going to be a big benchmark to see how that goes. And then Major League Baseball, of course, I think they report on Wednesday. They start what they're calling summer camp. We may forget, but they never even really started their season. So, they're going to do their summer camp starting July 1, and then opening day is going to be the 23rd or 24th. They're going to play a 60-game schedule. That's the idea. And I guess they're going to kind of trim down the rosters during these 3 weeks leading up to this.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a group that screwed things up. Baseball could have.
They could have been already started, and man, they just ripped it.
And I guess what's infuriating to most people, it didn't seem like the virus was anywhere near the issue. It was all over money.
Oh yeah. No, they were just.
That's right, and they have. They could have done a lot of goodwill, and now they've. I'm glad they're going to play, and it'd be like a 60. It'd be a dash because the normal season is 162 games, so they're playing, a little bit more than a third of the season. But
yeah,
and a lot of interesting, DH for both leagues. They've got the extra inning rule where you start on second base.
Yeah, what is that? The international rule.
International rule. So there's a lot of different things to it, a little bit. But man, they had some goodwill, and they just Major League Baseball does. They probably do the worst of any league out there in terms of public relations and so forth. And I wish them well, and I'll watch, but they left a sour taste in I think a lot of people's mouth.
I think this little period of time with Major League Baseball was the shining example of why they've been sliding down the popularity list for so long, because it's obvious that the owners and the players just do not get along. And I don't know, I mean, depending on which side you want to be on, you could pick a side, but the bottom line is they're both guilty. I mean, they're both guilty of just not, like, I don't even, like, they can't even sit in a room with each other, it would seem. And I don't know if it's because the Major League Players Union is so powerful that they just ram heads together when it comes to dealing with the owners. But if you look at, like, the NBA, it looked like the NBA was headed to this same point that the Major League Baseball got to, but some of the big players in the NBA got together on a call and said, no, we need to figure out how to make this work, and we need to all get in a room, like, not necessarily in a room, we all need to get in a call together with owners and the Adam Silver, and we need to figure out how to work this out. And they just bypass that, and Major League Baseball just does not seem capable of ever doing that.
No, and it's a tradition of labor strife. The NBA seems the players seem to be, I guess you could say, a partnership with owners.
Yeah,
I mean they pretty much work together on a lot of issues. Major League Baseball and the players they can barely agree that the sky's blue.
Yeah,
and it's a constant. It's kind of sad to be perfectly honest with you, but at least they're going to attempt to. And I'm still not 100% either one is going to pull it off. I think I think so, but there's just a lot of negativity right now, especially in the media and social media, over the spread of this virus. So we'll see if they can pull it off. I sure hope so. As I mentioned, the country desperately, they need something to unify behind, and they also need something to distract us from the virus and other issues. And I think sports oftentimes can do that.
Yeah, well, I look forward to it. I hope they pull it off. I will say this. I never really watched Major League Baseball since I was a kid to start with, and I'm not encouraged to do it now. I guess I will watch the NBA because I've always been more interested in that. And I'm with you on the fact that it seems like the players and the owners, for the most part, in the NBA understand that if they shoot each other in the foot, they all lose. And I guess I just appreciate the fact that they do that. And there's kind of, as you pointed out, I mean, there have been some labor stoppages in the NBA, but historically speaking, going back the last 30 years, the NBA has been a lot better about the relationship between the players and the ownership. And they've just, even when they've had work stoppages, they've managed to figure out how to finish a season. I mean, look, Major League Baseball canceled a season basically over a labor strife. And so
canceled the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, and the NBA always seems to find a way to work this out. And I know it gets a lot of negativity for other things, but at the same time, if you're a sports fan and you want to see the sport, that's one of the ones that I think you kind of have to support, even if you don't necessarily like watching the games. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the WKU men's basketball team has added another Mr. Basketball signee, Davion McKnight. He was named Mr. Basketball yesterday in a virtual ceremony, and he becomes the third one on the roster right now. But they've had, I think 4 of the last 5 Mr. Basketballs on their roster. They had, Cameron Justice? I think he was 2015, and then they have Carson Williams now. He was 2016, and then they have Tavion Hollingsworth 2017. I guess 4 of the last 6. I guess is the way it works out. And it's kind of interesting when you look back. I mean, it's kind of interesting in the sense that you would think that the Mr. Basketballs would wind up at Kentucky or Louisville more often. But recently they haven't. And I don't know. One of the things I think about is a lot of times when we look at high school basketball players, the best player in high school may not be the best prospect. I mean, you can be a great high school player, you can be a great college player, you can be a great professional player, and not necessarily be great at the other levels. You could have improved. You could be like Dennis Rodman or Scottie Pippen, and turn into great professionals, but they were not great college or high school players. And so I think sometimes what happens is people are like, well, that guy shouldn't have been Mr. Basketball because he's not a great college prospect, but he may have been the best high school player that year. And so I think that's sometimes people get that kind of thing mixed up. But I do think that Tavion Hollingsworth has proven to be a very good college basketball player. I think the same is true for Carson Williams and Cameron Justice. So at the same time, it can be true across the board.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily just because they don't, UK and Louisville, are, especially with Coach Cal at UK, I mean, they have not recruited Kentucky a whole lot.
No.
And now, if there was a player in Kentucky that was at the level they wanted to, they would recruit him hard. But Kentucky, it's not like it's a big state. It's a state that loves basketball.
Yeah.
And Kentucky has had a history of getting some Kentucky players, but not as much recently.
Yeah.
And
I would say
in fact, Louisville has gotten more Kentucky players oftentimes than Kentucky has lately.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would say that Cal probably should rethink that because Darius Miller, I thought, was key to his national championship there at Kentucky. And, I mean, he was a great player coming out of high school. That he inherited. Yeah, that he inherited. But, I mean, if he wouldn't have had him on that team, there would have been a couple of games they'd have been in trouble. I mean, he was a key player on that team, even though he was not a star or a standout.
I agree, and probably none of these players that Western has would be a star at Kentucky.
Yeah,
but I think they could play or help the program.
Yeah,
same as Louisville. But this is a feather in Western's cap. To be honest with you, I mean, it is. that is, and I think the people at Western, the supporters appreciate it too. And it's one thing to put a Kentucky kid on a roster, but it's another thing, can they help you? This is not charity where you just give out
Right.
scholarships. So, but these have all been good players. I saw Davian McKnight play at the King of the Bluegrass tournament a couple years ago, and he's a really good player. Now he's not big; he's a point guard, and so he'll probably be behind the other point guard that transferred in that had to sit out last year from Lipscomb. But he's strong. He's a good player. He's well coached, and he's another good player. That Western has done a good job of finding.
You mentioned a feather in the cap. I also think it's just a great selling point for Western to have these Kentucky kids. I mean, we've talked about this before, have these Kentucky kids on the roster. But like you said, I mean, they're not just, hey, he went to school at Apollo or whatever. It's like he's an outstanding player on top of those things. I mean, proof is, Tavian Hollingsworth is going to go down, I think, as one of the best players ever in WKU history. Is he a pro prospect? I mean, he can probably go overseas and play. I mean, he might be able to fill somebody's roster in the G League and maybe get up to the NBA at some point in time. But as a college player, I mean, I think he's an outstanding college player. But as you point out, he may not be Kentucky's number one guy. But I've always contended to the fact that sometimes schools like Kentucky overlook a simple fact that having a guy in your program for a number of years may pan out at the back end of their career. I mean, we've seen this in the national tournament the last few years. You'll have some great young players, but having some veteran players in your roster has really proven to be significant, I believe, in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you said. And, again, I think it's more of a credit to Western. Now, who knows if Kentucky or Louisville went, after those kids, would they had gone there? I don't know, maybe, but you can also say that they say that maybe Western offers them a chance to play a little bit quicker, and that's probably true in a lot of ways. But it is definitely a credit to Coach Stansbury and the staff for because Coach Stansbury is a national recruiter too. He gets players everywhere.
Oh yeah.
But he has supplemented his roster. I don't even think supplemented is the right word. He has used these Kentucky players. They're starters. And
you would say he supplemented his roster with these 4 and 5 stars nationally.
I think that's probably the better way to put it.
Yeah. I was looking over the list of Kentucky Mr. Basketballs, and I don't expect you to know them all because I sure as heck didn't. But there were a couple who stood out to me that I thought, were they probably the best Mr. Basketballs ever?
As soon as I read that, the one player that I wrote down was the one that I saw in my lifetime, and that's Rex Chapman.
Yeah, I mean, I figured, and the other one that really jumps out is Wes Unseld. I mean, it's just, and then you look at the players in Kentucky history who were not Mr. Basketballs, and you think to yourself, how were they not Mr. Basketballs at that particular point in time?
Allen Houston, because Richie Farmer was Mr. Basketball.
Yep.
Weren't they in the same class?
I believe that is correct. Yeah, I believe that's correct. And then, Dave Cowens, was he?
He went to Newport Catholic.
Yeah.
I don't know who won it that year.
I don't either, but he wasn't Mr. Basketball from what my cursory glance of the list. I did not see his name on there, but he's the one that jumped out at me. But again, you just don't know sometimes. I mean, a player, they may have been a great, an outstanding high school player, but that particular year, just somebody was better than them.
Or had more exposure. Getting to the state tournament used to be.
Yeah, that had to be huge.
Huge in terms of Mr. Basketball.
Yeah. Suddenly the name has slipped me. Played against Metcalfe County. Felton Spencer, yes. He was not Mr. Basketball. And I was like, was that 86, I think? And so I'm thinking to myself, I forgot to even look who it was in 86 because I probably wouldn't have recognized the name.
Being recruited by Kentucky helps too.
That is true.
It does. Brandon Stockton.
Absolutely.
Winning the Class A state tournament was clearly helpful, but being recruited by Kentucky has never hurt either.
Yeah, because, you mentioned the exposure because Glasgow managed to not make it to the state tournament while Brandon was playing there. But they did travel. I mean, they played in the
All-A.
In the All-A. They played in, I think, the LIT twice, I think, while he was in high school. And also he had an opportunity, as it turned out, there was a lot of talent in that late 90s, early 2000s period when he was playing. So a lot of people got to see him play against players who were being heavily recruited, not just by Kentucky, but who were standout players at that point in time. So, I mean, because Fishback was at Bowling Green. He was 2 years older, I think, than Brandon. But, and you think, was it Tony Key, I think, was at Russellville during that
I believe
run?
that's right, yeah.
I mean, so there were some players just in this area that people were coming to watch, and so that gave Brandon a lot of exposure, I think, during his time in high school. Then also, I thought about, you mentioned Rex Chapman. I wrote him down here with a question mark, and Wes Unseld. Those two really stood out to me. But on the girls' side, the Miss Basketball, I think you called this one at the end of last year's state tournament. You said basically you expected Ryle to win the state championship again, and Maddie Scher would pretty much be Miss Basketball. And they didn't get a chance to win the state championship because it didn't get finished. But she was Miss Basketball. And I mean, I was reading her little bio. I was reading her bio.
She played hurt this year, too.
Yes, she played hurt. She didn't play in that first-round game at the state tournament. They still won by 22, so she was on a very good team.
Signed with Oregon.
Yep, signed with Oregon. And 5'11". She'll be I guess, point guard at Oregon from what I was reading.
They don't recruit bad players.
No, they don't. They can't afford to recruit bad players where they want to be right now. But yeah, I mean, she's an outstanding player.
They got another Kentucky kid out there, Aaron Boley.
Yep, Aaron Boley, also a former Miss Basketball.
E-Town.
And then I was looking down the list of the Miss Basketballs, and there were a couple of them that I got to see a few of them play. Some of them I didn't if they were in Northern Kentucky, just because we never wound up with the situation where you or Glasgow or someone around here was playing them. But one of the players that stood out to me was Sydney Moss on there. I mean, I thought she was great in high school.
She was. Went to Florida. Didn't work out there. Ended up in
Thomas More. Yep. I mean, she was one of my favorite players I saw. And another thing, Michaela Epps was a Miss Basketball.
Great player.
And when I was reading the story about Maddie Scher, they were talking about some of the coaches who influenced her, and two of her AAU coaches. One was Trent Milby, and the other was Anthony Epps. I guess they must have coached together.
Yeah, Trent was big in the AAU scene.
Yep. Had gone from Caverna to Marion County, won state championships there.
Yeah.
And that's where Michaela Epps played, obviously. And so I thought that was a pretty interesting connection that she had developed as an AU circuit player.
Crystal Kelly, who was Miss Basketball, ended up being All-American at Western.
Yep.
Was on that Sacred Heart team that won, I think, 3 in a row. Beat our team in 2004 in the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
Great player. And they had one that came right after her, I think,
Omarud.
Omarud.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean there was some but just I only saw Crystal Kelly. Well, I saw her play more in college than I did in high school. But it was just one of the, like I said, the one player who just stood out to me was Sydney Moss, and just the
athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, just I remember seeing her play. It kind of like, Dee Givens is a player who was not a Miss Basketball, but I thought she was at that level when she was in high school. But they both kind of stood out to me. Moss was a better scorer, obviously, in high school.
Jamie Walls was a great high school player.
Yeah.
That's Jeff Walls' sister. I mean, averaged about 40 a game. I mean, she was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of Kentucky has produced some really good girls basketball players.
Yeah.
Throughout the years.
We were talking about just that as a comparison, that Kentucky's a big basketball state, but we've talked about this before. I mean, it seems like talent-wise on the girls' side, it's translated more to where they've been recruited by Kentucky and Louisville, 2 top programs, but also places like Oregon, Tennessee. Was it Yukari Figs played at Tennessee? Purdue, that's right. There was somebody on there who played at Tennessee. I can't remember who it was now. But I was just noticing how many of the Kentucky Miss Basketballs were recruited by top-notch programs, not just in the state but outside the state.
Yeah, and I've gone blank on the one at Tennessee. She's assistant coach at UK right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, was at Western too as assistant coach. I've gone completely blank. She was a Kyra Elsie.
That was it. Yeah. Anyway, so I thought that was pretty interesting, just breaking down that real quick. Like you said, feather in the cap for the Hilltoppers. The Lady Tops have had their share of top-notch players come there,
They have.
Kentucky players as well. So it's just a great thing for WKU in this area as a recruiting tool and as a get people in the stands and watch the games tool. This is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, I learned something interesting this morning, I guess. Pat Forty must listen to the show. That's good to have him on board.
That's correct.
He can do the 40-yard dash, sitting right here sometime if he wants. I say that mostly joking. He probably doesn't have a clue what we do here. But he did have a thing that he published. He writes for Sports Illustrated these days, and he did publish a thing where he basically laid out what the coronavirus has exposed is the kind of fragility of college athletics in a lot of ways, especially as it comes to the geographic nature of these conferences that have been built because of football.
Football only.
And it's, so you wind up with Nebraska in the Pac-12 and West Virginia in wherever they are.
Nebraska in the Big Ten.
I'm sorry. Are they?
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were in the Pac-12.
No, Nebraska's with Maryland and Indiana. They used to be in the Big. They used to be in the
Big Eight with
Big
Oklahoma
Eight.
and all
That's
those
right.
people they're related to.
No, they jumped east.
Well, so whatever. That's kind of my point.
Yes, you made your point.
You don't know where they are these days or who they're in a conference against. Who their rivalries are supposed to be because they're unnatural.
Yeah, we talked about this. I've mentioned it several times where it made just no financial sense.
Right.
Especially for your non-revenue sports.
Mm-hmm.
The travel expenses of traveling 900 miles to play a baseball game or a softball game or a volleyball game. It made zero sense. I never understood it from a financial manner, how in the heck they could even do that.
Yeah.
It just didn't make sense unless the football contracts were bringing in so many millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It never made sense to me why all these big-time Division I schools on their home games would put players up in hotels.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they distrust them that much, you have to put them in a hotel. I mean, the lavishness of sports, I just felt there was going to come a day where things would have to change.
There's going to be a reckoning.
There had to be a reckoning, and I guess what irritated, I didn't see this happening, but what never made sense to me is how tuition kept becoming more and more expensive.
Uh-huh.
Unreasonably expensive, in my opinion. If you want people to go to college, it shouldn't cost them $12,000 a year to go to just a general university, and that's basically what it costs right now.
Right.
And that never made – I didn't think that was right, and at the same time, we were spending all this money when it just didn't seem rational to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I mentioned before we went off the air back in May or whatever, we had some comments that maybe, out of this crisis, some things can come about that will be more helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat Forty came up with an idea of basically redesigning all these conferences into a geographical look, which I've said all along has always made sense to me. Well,
and one of the things he did was say, I don't remember what he called the conference, but so Kentucky, Louisville, Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, Vanderbilt would all be in a conference together. I think there were 12 teams or 10 teams, 10 schools in it, and then they would just all. So you would have a geographical center to the conference. And I mean, that's implausible on so many levels, but I think the idea is absolutely plausible and should be executed if possible.
11 games, and then you'd have a playoffs with more than 4.
Yeah.
More teams could get in and so forth, and he felt like that the financial savings that you'd have on travel plus the expanded playoffs would offset some of this. Now, the problem with that is the Big Five conferences just has a monopoly hold, and they're probably not want to give up any money.
Well, and the thing is that
they're not hurting as much.
They're not, but on the flip side of that, they're not hurting as much because they know they have some guaranteed TV contracts. Those contracts are going to be paid. That's their assumption as of right now. But one of the things that we have seen is, I believe we've seen some of these broadcast entities have come back to these conferences and said, we're going to have to renegotiate this because we've lost all this revenue that we didn't sell on the advertising side, which means we don't have it to pay to you. We need to sit down at the table. And so what we're, I think, about to see is a rolling snowball back the other direction. The question is, how much time do people want to spend in court litigating against each other, spending more money versus sitting down and trying to come up with some sort of agreement that's going to allow these conferences to get the money they think they need to get, but at the same time, these broadcasters to be able to pay their bills as well. And that's, as that money escalates, at some point in time, it's going to go the other direction, and that's where we're headed at the moment, it would seem. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And one of the things that could come out of that is you might have some school presidents and even athletic directors who are on the bottom side of these Power 5 conferences, somebody like Vanderbilt, who steps up and says, look, we've been willing to play this game because we were grandfathered into it, but we've got to change this because we can't justify it anymore. Now, that's a private institution. They may have more internal leverage one way or the other, I don't know, versus the public institutions. But I think you're going to see some of this is that even in the Power 5 conferences, a school like maybe Purdue or Baylor or Texas Tech or one of those, West Virginia even, they're going to be in a different position than, say, Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State or Michigan or one of those. And I think that dynamic within the Power 5 conferences might be pretty interesting.
Yeah. The scary part is that a lot of the colleges, not a lot, there have been colleges, mid-majors, have dropped a lot of their minor programs.
Yeah.
Whether it's baseball, whether it's cross-country, whether it's tennis or swimming, whatever, to save money. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't like that in a lot of ways because in one sense it doesn't make sense. It's almost like an excuse. I think like Bowling Green University is one of the schools that dropped baseball.
Right.
And why that doesn't make sense to me is that other than the travel expenses is a big deal, but in baseball you only get 11 half scholarships, and there's 30 on the team, which means that most of the players are paying their own way or paying a large segment of their way.
Yeah.
So when you eliminate the sport, the universities are actually making money in a lot of ways off your minor sports because those kids aren't getting full scholarships.
Yeah, you just cut 19 players. If 11 of them had full scholarship, which is not how it works.
That's correct.
But if you've just cut 19 paying students out of now they can still be your students, but they're not coming there if they're not playing baseball.
That's why they go there. That's exactly right. So a lot of their expense, and this is why financially doesn't make sense to me with baseball and softball. The expense is the travel. Mm-hmm. That's where the expense is. So if you could cut down on the expense, the universities would make more money.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be net positive instead of net negative if they were to cut down the expenses.
Just look at Western. How many trips do they make to Southern Florida, to Florida National, Florida Atlantic, and to the Texas schools? Mm-hmm. And is it a big deal in football and basketball? No, not per se. But it is a big deal in volleyball and baseball and every other thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no natural rival to be playing Texas, San Antonio, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And because of the conference is spread out everywhere, it's financially very difficult for mid-majors to survive in this context.
Yeah, and so I mean, the real friction is between the Power 5 and the non-Power 5 or whatever they like to call those things.
And football and everything else.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest.
But at the same time, I do see a circumstance where within the Power 5 conferences there could be a real friction as well.
I hope.
Especially if that TV money gets rolled back. Because now those programs on the bottom end of the Power 5 are not going to get the bonus of being in that conference anymore.
Well, the Power 5 made a decision several years ago that I wasn't real crazy about, but they decided in football the Power 5 is the heck with everybody else. We're going our own way.
That's right.
It's us, and the only bone they'll throw out is we need some of the other schools to come play us. Mm-hmm. We'll give you $1.5 million. Mm-hmm. But basically, you're out.
Yeah.
And in the NCAA,
if you'll come sit at our table, we'll scrape some scraps off for you.
Yeah, and the NCAA, just sit back and let it happen.
Yeah, that's right, and that's been one of the biggest problems, I think, overall. Utah is the program that's in the Pac-12 that I was trying to think of that makes no sense to me. Yes, it's in the Western it's in the western part of the nation, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Utah being in the Pac-12.
What does West Virginia make sense to be in the Big 8?
Yeah, that's who it was. West Virginia's in the Big 12. That was the other one. Yeah, no, not at all.
12. Does that make any sense?
No, I mean just because they get to play Texas Tech and they can just throw the ball all
and
over
their travel is awful too.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like you said, there are always positives to come out of circumstances like these. You and I can't be, evidenced by Pat Forty, the only people who look at the present landscape and say this is unsustainable. This has to be corrected, and it has to be done in such a way so that we can return to a natural rivalry whereby you want people to come to the games. They're going to come to the games if you're playing people they know. Mm-hmm. They're not going to come to the games when you're playing people they don't even know where they are.
Right.
These, what do they call them? The geographic location schools instead of like actual names or whatever. You want your fans to come to the games, play people they know. And that happens by being in conferences that people can find. They can drive easily to the away games. They can come to the home games. You're going to get better crowds.
And from an educational perspective that nobody cares about. But in college, there's 99% of the college athletes do not play pro whatever.
Yeah.
It makes even more sense. You should be able to play an opponent within 3 hours. Get on a bus and come back. Because if not, educationally, it's a nightmare. Believe me, I did it at Louisville, played baseball, and it was very difficult educationally to miss that much class. It's just hard.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't care about that. I understand that, but it's difficult to do that.
Well, they should care because we are talking about education first. And if we want to keep telling the lie, then we can leave it as it is.
Right.
But if we want to start telling the truth, then it needs to change.
I agree.
Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, we were off the air for a month and a week, and I didn't really necessarily pick up any new hobbies. I learned how to make some pretty good sweet potato fries.
Wow, that's impressive.
My wife and I started doing a lot more hiking. We take the dogs out in the woods.
That's good.
Yep. Get assaulted by ticks. That was not fun.
That's no good.
Walk through a bunch of mud. But yeah, those are like the two things, cooking a little more and getting out with the dogs and walking and enjoying some time with my wife while I was out of here for a month. Those are a couple of things that I really took on as hobbies, I suppose you would say. What you pick up any new hobbies lately?
No, not really. I'm kind of boring, to be honest with you. I've been pretty, I guess, overall cautious about things. I haven't really traveled anywhere, to be perfectly honest with you. I've played a little bit of golf, not a lot. I know golf courses are full, but I've been I have not played a lot. Now, I don't love golf, but I have not played a whole lot.
Just something to get out of the house? Is that what you did?
Yeah. I mean, I do. I've been indoor working out for the last 3 or 4 years, and now I'm outdoors. I'm doing more walking and running outdoors. I guess that's good. Try to work crossword puzzles a lot, and I'm reading. I'm on my David Baldacci kick right now, and so I'm reading.
Tell us about David Baldacci. I don't know that.
Oh, he's into David Baldacci has it's spy and crime and things like that. He has a bunch of different series of books and so forth, and I'm a big fan of his. So I've read a lot of books. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I didn't do as much reading and writing as I initially planned. One of the things, my first week that I was off went pretty well, but at the end of that week, my daughter's car was parked in front of her house on 11th Avenue over in Bowling Green, and a dude just ran through it, basically. And destroyed it. I think that was on the Friday afternoon at the end of that first week. So the next week, I spent most of that time trying to get all of the insurance stuff worked out.
Yeah, that's a headache.
Yeah, I mean, it was a much better experience than I went. I mean, when I went into it, I was like, this is going to be a terrible month.
Yeah, I guess I miss going places.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I miss going to sporting events, whether it's high school games or whatever. I just miss going places, and not that some of them aren't really open, but just going places and being comfortable and things like that. I really, really, really miss that. I miss school. I'll be honest with you. I miss that.
And you would think I don't know about you in this sense.
I like going out to restaurants, and I've come to I go and I pick up food all the time.
Yeah.
But just going into restaurants, sitting down, hadn't done a lot of that. I've missed that with friends.
Well, and that's been, I think, the most difficult part of all this is just losing that social contact.
Yeah.
Because once it kind of spirals out of control a little bit, you kind of maybe get into a bubble where you're just thinking to yourself, well, I got to focus on these things, and I don't have time for all that. I can't. As I tell people, I've gotten into the habit of like canceling out the noise. I mean, we've talked about this. I've not watched television news for 9 years.
Good idea. Even sports. I'm glad when we came in here, we did as much of sports as we could.
Yeah.
Because sports has been taken over right now on TV. I mean, they don't have a lot to talk about, but it's depressing to listen to a lot of it, to be honest with you.
Well, and I just practice canceling the noise. And
good idea. That'll make you healthier.
Well, and one of the things I do is like on my Twitter feed, I can control my Twitter feed, what I see and what I don't see, unlike Facebook. So I really don't use Facebook a whole lot except for business purposes. I follow specific things on Twitter to get my information that I want, but I don't go down the rabbit holes and all that kind of stuff. And I just think it's a good thing to do, especially in a time like this, is to find a way to cancel the noise and focus on doing things that you want to do, even if you can't do some of the things you want to do. So that's where you might have to find some different hobbies or new habits. And, now's a good time to do those things, I think.
Yeah, give it a try.
Yeah, I might as well. I mean, look, one of the things that my wife and I found out, there's some great trails all around here to go walk on. Some beautiful land we have here, and we've discussed the fact, we wish we'd have been doing this for the last 17 years since we lived here.
Then that's good.
Yeah.
You need to tell me off there.
Yeah. I mean, so, there's some great places to go around here, and there's a lot to see, and outdoors, not at a restaurant necessarily.
Good park system.
I mean, we live in a beautiful county, in a beautiful area, and we should celebrate that.
I agree with that. Amen.
Well, this is Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We will be back next week.
There you go.
All right.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.